The story of the Christian Martyrs will forever remain etched in the history that shaped the creation of modern Uganda. This is a story that has both fascinated and inspired local Christianity and around the world.
One of the great people in the world said one time, that was Tertullian, he said, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of Christianity." The Ugandan martyrs have had a great impact on not only Ugandans, not only Africans, but to also other areas of the world.
The Martyrs' story is fascinating because of the bravery of the scores of young men who laid down their lives for the new religion which was sweeping through the kingdom of Buganda. It was the story of faith and conviction. The events that immediately triggered off the Martyrs that resulted into the Uganda Martyrs began here, on the shores of Lake Victoria in Munyonyo, one hot afternoon on May 25, 1886. Kabaka Mwanga was living in temporary royal courts here because of the destruction of the main one in Mengo by fire.
In the evening, he decides to come back to his palace. But as he comes, he lost his gun in the waters of Lake Victoria. How his anger precipitated the more. Arriving at the shore, he found a witch doctor stationed, because that witch doctor knew that whenever the king went hunting, on his return, he used to share meat with his people. But this time he didn't have any meat. Now, the king tells him, this time, possibly the geese I've shot at, because when he failed to shoot, when he failed to get any hippo, at the end of it, or he shot at some geese. So he came back with, now he tells the witch doctor, possibly I share with you this. They said, that's not meat. That's not meat. But I tell you, we've always told you, get rid of the whites. Get rid of them. Tell them to go back. And as for these, our boys that believe in them, kill them, we shall give you others. Oh, anger precipitated them more. Now he moves from Mulungu, where he found the witch doctor. He moves to the palace, expecting to be welcomed as it used to be. But now this time, there's nobody. He calls and calls, nobody.
That afternoon, the simmering conflict between the king of Buganda, Kabaka Mwanga, worried about his diminishing power and influence over his subjects, and the growing local Christian community and increasingly influential missionaries, spiraled out of control. It led to the abrupt executions of scores of young Christian converts at his royal courts who were to become the Uganda Martyrs. Christian missionaries first arrived in Uganda with the Church Missionary Society CMS led by Lieutenant George Shaggold Smith and Reverend C.T. Wilson on the 30th of June 1877. Their coming was in response to an invitation by Kabaka Mutesa in 1875 to the Queen of England to send missionaries to his kingdom. The CMS missionaries were followed 2 years later by two Catholic missionaries, Father Simeon Laudel and Brother Amans Delmas, who landed at Kigunga on Lake Victoria near Entebbe on 17th February 1879. Within just 8 years, Christianity had made very serious inroads in Buganda as it rapidly displaced local traditional religions. To the great concern of the young Kabaka Mwanga and his chiefs, the onward march of Christianity was being felt even within the royal courts that he controlled. Kabaka Mwanga and his close advisors, among them the Chancellor or Katikiro Mukasa, were worried about the growing influence of the new religion. As adherents of traditional religion, they were worried about the growing number of Christian converts, especially among some court officials and royal pages. They were also concerned about the Kabaka's rapidly diminishing power over his kingdom. They thus wanted to do something drastic to reverse the developments. By 1886, The Anglican Church was fully established with a number of branches around the kingdom and with several converts, a number of them chiefs or officials of the royal palace. One of the leading proponents of the Anglican Church was Alexander Mackay, who arrived in Buganda in November 1878. Mackay translated the Bible into Luganda, an important milestone that made it readily available to the new converts. He also installed a printing press which was useful in producing the Bible and other religious texts locally. However, Mackay's relations with Kabaka Mwanga was strained. Indeed, due to success in making inroads of his church, the new relationships with the king was often unpredictable. At one point, Mackay was forced to flee into hiding in this cave in Natete, where he hid his precious printing machine and copies of newly translated Bibles and books from the anger and destruction by the Kabaka. After Father Simeon Lodol, or Mapera as he was commonly known, and Brother Amons Delmas landed at Kigungu, they rapidly established the Roman Catholic Church in Buganda once they had gained acceptance and welcome by Kabaka Mutesa, the father of Mwanga. The pair first pitched camp at the present-day Mapera Secondary School in Chisubi. One of the poles they used to pitch a tent later sprouted into a tree that still stands at the site today. From here, they moved through Chitevi. Mapera and Delmas stayed here from 21st of February 1879 to 7th March of that year as they waited to be cleared to be received by Kabaka Mutesa. Soon after meeting him, they were allocated land at Lubia before moving to Nabulagala, where the first Catholic mission was established. It was at this mission where the first converts, namely Matia Mulumba, Andrew Kagwa, Joseph Balikudembe, and Luke Banabachintu, were baptized. Many more converts were baptized at a new site in Nalukolongo that the young Kabaka Mwanga offered to the Catholic Church in 1885. By 1886, when the mass execution took place, the Catholic Church had spread far and wide in Buganda, with a strong outpost in Mityana. Before the Namugongo executions, 3 Anglican converts, Joseph Yusuf Lugalama, Mark Kakumba, Nuwa Serwanga, were killed on the orders of Mwanga and are considered the first Christian martyrs of Buganda. They were put to death at Mpimireva, near Busega on the 31st of January 1885. A few months later, Joseph Balikudembe became the first Catholic martyr when he was executed on the 15th of November 1885. Among some reasons for his martyrdom was his opposition to plans by Kabaka Mwanga to kill Bishop Hannington, but other reasons built up gradually. He was beheaded at Nachivubo in present-day Kampala. Indeed, in the aftermath of his death, the Catholic missionaries found more impetus to carry out their work. Over 105 were baptized within a week of Balikudembe's death. It was therefore not surprising that by 25th May 1886, Kabaka Mwanga was angry and fed up with the Christians. He was determined to put an end to the growing influence of Christianity once and for all. On that fateful day, he abruptly returned from an unsuccessful hippo hunting trip to find no court officials to accord him his usual welcome back home. This to him confirmed the growing allegiance of his subjects to another power center.
Now, even in their prayer, they say, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come." Thy kingdom come? Whose kingdom?
The fate of the young Christian pages and court officials was sealed the moment they were not at their stations to receive the Kabaka. Some, like Dennis Sebugwao, had gone to attend catechism classes instead of being at hand to receive the king, something that greatly annoyed the Buganda sovereign. Traditional leaders constantly warned him about the dangers of the new religion. Mwanga was angry at his subjects for following a white god and was fearful that they would eventually abandon him. Worse still, most of his pages were Christian converts, yet they were supposed to obey him without question.
Believing in him, they will be among those who inherited the kingdom of heaven. So they decided to obey the ruler of heaven rather than the ruler of the earth.
The first to face the Kabaka's rage on May 25, 1885 was Musa Mukasa Muzingiti, who was killed right at the shores of Lake Victoria in Munyonyo, where the king had disembarked from his futile hippo hunting trip. On May 26th, 2 more Christian converts, this time Catholic, were executed by the angry king. The first to be killed was a page in the royal court, Denis Sebugwao. His execution was followed hours later by that of Andrew Kagwa. Andrew Kagwa was the head bandsman and was favorite of Mwanga as well as his constant companion on hunting trips. He was also tipped to be the chancellor, and it was believed that the then chancellor, Mukasa, expedited his execution out of envy. As proof of his death, the executioners cut off one of his arms and presented it to the chancellor, Mukasa.
Andrea Kagwa, or Kahwa, as they used to be called by people of his area in Bunyoro, when he was brought here in Buganda, the letter H is very difficult. We hardly use it. Kagwa. He became Kagwa. And he used even a very bad term, that Munyoro. You see another element that he brings in. Why bringing up even somebody's tribe? That Munyoro.
Still angry, Kabaka Mwanga convened a meeting under this tree, which still stands at the Munyonyo Catholic parish, where he ordered the execution of 12 Catholic and 13 Anglican pages working at his royal courts. Besides the pages, Bruno Serunkuma, a guard at the royal courts, and Ponciano Ngondwe, a tax collector and former soldier, were among those who were not pages that were condemned to death. In the next 2 days following the arrests and initial executions, the rest of the condemned Christians were frog-marched to Namugongo, one of the traditional execution grounds in Buganda. They were shackled and tortured and beaten throughout the trek to Namugongo. Along the way, Ponciano Ngondwe, the former soldier, saw no reason why he had to be marched to Namugongo to be killed. At Takajunge, now known as Chamula, along the current Salama Road, he challenged the chief executioner, Mukajanga, that he would not go further. He was speared to death and his body hacked to pieces just a few kilometers from Mwanga's palace in Munyonyo. Meanwhile, Matia Mulumba, originally from Busoga and an influential catechist, was arrested from Kampala Hill, now known as Old Kampala, on the 26th May 1886. Matia Mulumba had once been a chief of Singo, Mitiana. At that time of his arrest, he was living on Kampala Hill. He also did a lot of Christian work at Butega, from where he evangelized almost the entire county of Singo. He was cut bit by bit and eventually died on March 30th after he had been left to be fed on by vultures while still alive. His converts who helped establish the Catholic Church in Mitiana, namely Noah Mawagali and Luke Banabachintu, were not spared the Kabaka's wrath either. Noah Mawagali was executed in Mitiana, while Banabachintu was marched to Namugongo, where he died with the rest of the martyrs on June 3rd. In the meantime, on the way to Namugongo, Gonzaga Gonza, who failed to continue the torturous journey, was killed at this spot known as Lubawu Hill near Naria. Gonzaga was executed on May 27th. The name Namugongo is no accident. There is a theory that many victims eventually arrived being dragged on their backs at the execution site because they were unable to walk, hence the name Namugongo.
People were brought, dragged on their backs. So the back in vernacular, on Luganda and Swahili, it's called Mugongo. So those who were here were asking themselves, how have people managed to reach here? Bano bazze batya in Luganda, era nga baddamu abaaliwo nti bano bazze Namugongo. So that's why this place is called Namugongo, meaning they have come on their backs.
The choice of Namugongo as the site where the Christian martyrs were executed was no surprise. Many of the martyrs were either royal pages or were sub-chiefs, and Namugongo was the execution site for the king's royal victims.
If the king said, we are going to raid an area, and you hid yourself, if you were found out later, the punishment would be brought to Namugongo and be burnt. The feature of Namugongo was not pangas, but fire.
At Namugongo, the martyrs were kept in stockades, where Chief Executioner Mukajanga and his henchmen continued the torture in a bid to get the young Christians to try and renounce their new faith. In the meantime, preparations for the execution went ahead. Piles of firewood were collected for the fires on which the martyrs would be burnt alive.
As soon as enough firewood had been realized, he said, now it's time to burn them. But he had meanwhile tried to save his relative Mbaga to Zinde, and he took them to his relatives at Buate where one of the parents even carried him on her laps, telling Tuzinde, give up the faith, Tuzinde. That Tuzinde said no.
On June 3, 1886, the decision was finally taken to execute the rest of the martyrs by burning. 31 Christians were burnt alive at Namugongo that fateful day. In all, a total of 45 martyrs, Catholic and Anglican, were murdered because of their faith and steadfast belief in Christianity at various places in Mityana and around Kampala. Charles Lwanga, the man who initially replaced Joseph Balikudembe as leader of the Christian pages at Mwanga's palace in Munyonyo, was burnt separately from the rest of the martyrs here in Namugongo, where the Catholic church shrine to the martyrs is found. He was actually killed on June 2nd, a few kilometers from the main execution site. Today, this magnificent basilica, which commemorates the 22nd Catholic martyrs, stands at the site.
Like one author says, in fact that is Fopel, 1962, the African Holocaust, the story of the Uganda Martyrs, drags him about 50 yards to the spot where he burnt him. And that is where the altar is in the basilica. That's the exact spot. And that is where his relic is, in a small glass.
Of the 45 Uganda martyrs, 22 were Catholic, 13 of them were royal pages, 4 were royal bandsmen, and 3 belonged to the county chief of Singo.
After being burnt in this place, they were laid in the church. Now, inside our museum, we have a church that we preserved, and we call it the Martyrs Memorial Chapel.
It is believed that if the palace at Mengo had not been destroyed, the number of martyrs might have been higher. In the end, the numbers were small because the temporary court at Munyonyo, where the executions were ordered and pages and officials rounded up, was too small to accommodate all the royal court workers. While Kabaka Mwanga sought to stem the tide of Christianity by executing its key adherents, the action only served to cement Christianity in Uganda.
Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, has hosted the highest number of popes, and they have all been to this ground. So that's how special this place is. Now, people come here basically to reflect on the journey that these young people moved through. And that is our point, that when you come to this place, you live different.
Indeed, without these matters, the story of Christianity in Uganda might have been a different one. It might not have been the compelling and inspiring story it has come to be, one that continues to attract hundreds of thousands of Christians from far and wide to Namugongo to relive the lives of brave young Christian converts who died for their faith.